folks, welcome to an episode of The Artenders with Mac and Dan. I am Dan, he is Mac.
Howdy.
Let's just get some things really quickly out of the way. Yes, I already have my espresso, but the funny thing is, we were recording an episode already. We were doing perfectly fine. We were reviewing James Acaster's Repertoire, a 2018 4-part comedy special that's released on Netflix. Pretty darn good.
Yeah.
And we were discussing it, and we were around 20 minutes into our recording session of the first part, and then because the battery that Mac used for the camera that records us visually for, our visual audience for YouTube and make some TikToks here and there, follow us.
Nice.
Yeah, it was
nice plug.
Yeah, super smooth.
Spontaneous plug. I loved it.
Because Mac allowed that to happen. Mac, would you please pull up the penalty board? Mac and I both agreed that if he allows the battery to die, because due to using the Amazon battery, I'm sorry. I hope. Well, now Amazon's never going to sponsor us.
Or you know what? I wouldn't have accepted it.
Or just having a low sort of battery in the first place. Mac is getting 2 points. This will be analogous to me not even pressing record.
Yeah, I mean,
and deep in. You know what I'm saying? If it's 2 minutes in,
yeah,
no big deal.
Almost
if
over
it's
the first segment.
If it's 20 minutes in,
yep.
That's a big deal.
Absolute
but we also
plan.
have to give a point to myself as well.
Because?
On the Don't Look Up episode, I said that satires don't really exist anymore. And that was so stupid of me. That was so insanely myopic and prisoner of the moment. Because satires definitely do exist, and pretty frequently nowadays. It's called Saturday Night Live, and so I don't know why I made that mistake. So Mac, can you count to us? Where are we at right now?
Right now I am at 7, and Danny's at 6.
Wow. So you are ahead. So
we have this episode, which I hope you
and then
just
2 more
absolutely trash.
Yeah.
I want the worst for you.
Okay. Thank you.
And then. And then 2 more after this, and then we have to suit up.
Yeah. So we're doing, and it's a little bit funny because we were already in the thick of it.
Yeah. So I got to rev myself back up.
Exactly.
Okay.
Good work out there. But we're doing, like I said, James Acaster's Repertoire, or as I like to call Mac's sneaky way of making me watch 4 different comedy specials. That are all tangentially related.
It's true.
It's three individual parts that sort of stand on its own, and then in the 4th part, in particular, everything is really brought in together. There may be an allusion or a reference in part 2 referencing part 1, but it's really brought together in the 4th part. It's recognize, represent, reset, and recap. Are the 4 parts. And so Mac, man, it's funny that we got to do this again, but let's just get to it. So you have a special love and affinity for James Acaster, but 100%. I want to talk about primarily what brought you into selecting these specials in particular, and I guess in general as well. Why James Acaster?
Sure. So I specifically have always felt this affinity for James Acaster because, okay, have you ever had an artist or someone that you have felt specifically close to because you feel like in another life you could have made the same thing? Does that make sense?
I guess if things had lined up differently for me, I think in some ways, sure. Yeah.
I have two like that.
Interesting.
One of them is Rex Orange County, where I feel like if I would have had a similar background, or if I would have gone into music and really done that, my sound would have been a lot like that. Every time I listen to him, I'm like, I totally could have made
assuming that all the other paths maintain the same, this career
and if
path
I was 10 times more talented, obviously, but. Also, it's the truth. I'm not gonna front.
Disappointment.
I mean, and then another one is James Acaster. I've always felt really close to him. I've always felt like if I would have taken a stab at comedy, I would have done something relatively similar. And I really like the way that he approaches things. But needless to say, I wanted to talk about Repertoire.
Okay.
Because and to quote James himself. He did an interview recently with, I can't remember if it was Seth Meyers or Graham Norton. I can't remember.
It's really funny because you're having the same exact thought experience as you did before.
But he had an interview with him where he was talking about how he has a knack for, he always releases specials at the same time that another comedian will reinvent the genre.
Yeah.
So like for instance, last year he released a special. Same
2021.
2021.
Last year.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you. He released a special at the same time.
Do you know the movie Deja Vu starring
It's
Denzel
weird,
Washington?
right? Yeah. Yes, I know. But he released a special at the same time as Bo Burnham. Inside.
Yep.
Which was impeccable. Obviously, we talked about that for an entire episode.
Yeah. Even though we shat on it, which was pretty funny.
Yeah. But we still had to go back to the very end and we're like, okay, this was better than we thought it was.
We just wanted to criticize it.
Yeah, it's true.
We were learning.
It's true. And then
It is good, though.
the other one being in 2018, he released Repertoire.
Yep.
Same time as Hannah Gadsby released Nanette.
Which we talked about briefly while reviewing Randy Feltface's, I forgot his name for a second. Randy Feltface's.
I almost said Randy Newman.
Purple Privilege.
Yeah.
The name Jamie came up in my head.
Jamie Feltface.
Yeah.
Jamie Feltface is a good name.
That's his younger brother.
That's a clean name is what it is.
Yeah.
But
I think it's safe to say, at least in my opinion, that even though he does a really, really good job, in my opinion, and I haven't watched that much comedy specials, right? Like, you know a lot more about comedy specials, and like I know a lot more about video games, but we're sort of like trying to bring each other closer to like our respective understandings of those mediums and like love for those mediums as well. But like I said, I haven't watched that much, but I feel like it's safe to say that James Acaster is not necessarily reinventing the wheel when it comes to comedy. I think what he does really, really well, but I would not consider James Acaster as somebody who like goes into the genre and like explodes and makes an absolutely insane breakthrough, as opposed to Nanette or Inside. You know.
So and at this point is where I just flat out disagree. I love you, Danny. I love James Acaster for lots of reasons, but I absolutely think that, for instance, there's just something about James Acaster that I think you kind of need a little bit of comedy knowledge to understand how insane all the things he's doing.
Call me stupid?
Yeah.
Or you call me ignorant?
100%.
Can't.
What can you do about it?
I can't.
I'm just gonna no. You're not stupid. No. It's like this. So, can you think of a video game?
Yeah.
That, like for instance, it would only be a video game that would make sense to people that play video games, or like would be unfair for me to play because I wouldn't really get it.
Like the WarioWare series.
The what?
The WarioWare series. Wario, right? You know Wario.
Yeah.
Evil Mario, Wario. Yeah. It's his own series of like, there's like a bunch of like micro games that they're called that you have to like sort of like complete within like 2 seconds of each other.
So that would be a great example.
Trying to be rich. I don't know what to tell you.
That would be a great example of a game that I would not understand.
I'm just looking at like my
your lineup right here.
Exactly. And
but
I saw WarioWare Smooth Moves for the Wii, which is a vastly underrated game.
So and that's a game I'm assuming that you like, but that if you were just to show other people, they'd be like,
what kind of psychedelics are you taking?
Right, exactly.
In regards to that,
is James Acaster for me. The psychedelics.
Well, where like James Acaster is like popular to those who know comedy, but like to those who are like just outside of it, like he's not like surface level popular like Dave Chappelle or like John Mulaney.
Yeah.
I was about to say James Mulvaney. That's just not.
Yeah. The last 3 or 4, I guess the top 5
or like Kevin Hart
comedians. That's what I'm about to say. Is like the past comedians that have been the #1 comedian in the world are Dave Chappelle, John Mulaney, Kevin Hart, Louis C.K., and Daniel Tosh.
That seems about right. Yeah.
Yeah, and he is nowhere close to any of those people,
and that's fine.
But no, yeah, absolutely. So I would liken him to a MF Doom, in that he is a comedian's comedian, in the same way that MF Doom is not commercially popular,
like Norm
but he is a
Macdonald?
rapper's rapper. Yes, absolutely. Norm Macdonald is a very good example. For real, that's a great example. That like all comedians are like bow down to.
You know what?
Norm Macdonald. Oh, rest in peace.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I actually understand that point perfectly.
Yeah.
Because one thing that in particular Norm Macdonald does is such the supreme confidence of, I know I'm funny and I don't care.
Yeah.
And so that's what makes him even funnier. And
Right.
I think that actually shows through a lot with James Acaster,
Yes.
where he doesn't relish in his own jokes, right? But what he does is that he leans into the absurdity and the wackiness of it. And like I said, he doesn't relish in it, so he hardly even acknowledges that he's a comedian on stage or joking. Right? He just allows things to really sit and like is comfortable with the fact of you being uncomfortable by just the absurdity of it all.
Yes.
And so that is what lends him to be a lot funnier than I think most people who would attempt to try his style of comedy.
He is one of maybe 2 or 3 comedians on the planet that I can think of that if they were to say a joke and it didn't land, he would say it a couple more times.
Yeah. Am I the other person?
Yeah. No.
Am I the other person?
No, you're not the other person. No. Although you do that, but no. I would not put you on that list.
So I'm the other person.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just you and James. That's it. Why is it that I feel so comfortable calling him James? Like,
my buddy James.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know. It just seems
number?
right. No, I wish, man. Oh God, I would have so many questions for him.
You blow him up. You block him
I really
immediately.
would. Yeah, it would be an issue.
Okay, but these comedians.
Yes. So there are a couple things that, because you're talking about James Acaster doesn't necessarily reinvent the wheel.
Yeah.
And although, or he doesn't do anything new necessarily. Like that's what you were saying. So my retort to that is, I think that we can agree that even if he isn't doing a whole lot of things that are entirely new, there are still a lot of things that he is doing that are, 1, not popular, and 2, at least no comedians are doing nowadays.
Okay. I'm with you.
Yeah. And then this is the one thing I'll raise you, though. There is at least one thing I can think of that he does and is currently doing that no other comedian has ever done that I can think of, that I have seen. Yeah, get ready. And it is that I've never, ever seen another comedian be as perfectly self-aware as he is about the fact that he is lying.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is most comedians, all comedians that I can think of, are either they fall in the category of they are going to sometimes lie to you, sometimes tell you the truth.
Yeah.
And they're not going to tell you which one they're doing, or they pride themselves on how honest they are.
The everyman approach.
Right. The George Carlins, the Louis C.K.'s that are like, I'm on stage and I'm giving you the most authentic version of myself as I possibly can. Right. Yeah. And then there are people that are like in the, what are you?
Which we found out with Louis C.K.
I
It's not necessarily true.
I knew you were going to make a fucking Louis C.K. joke. So sad. But I mean, we have to, when we're talking about like comedy, like evolutionary thing, it's hard not to talk about him. In the same way that like if we're talking about pop music, we just have to like kind of shake our heads and power through the Michael Jackson conversation, because you can't talk about pop music and not talk about Michael Jackson. So that is one type of person. Then there's also the types of comics that are like super in your face with their performer values. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
the Dimitri Martins, the Carrot Tops. You know, and I would also put Bo Burnham in there. Bo Burnham's very specific about the character he's trying to play.
Yeah. And like pop comics.
Right.
Too.
Right.
Yeah.
I have never seen a comedian that lies and then makes it really obvious that he just lied.
Like sort of doubles down. What? I can't say words right now. But like leans into the absurdity, right? Where it's like painfully is obvious where he's telling a lie, right? Like there may be some comedians where like they're telling you a story, but you're not necessarily sure if it's the truth, right? For some reason, my mind it instantly cast back to a time where I was watching a Bob Saget stand up. May he rest in peace. And
oh no,
well, he told a story where he was in a bathroom And so he walked in with John Stamos, and there was a guy already peeing there. And so him and John went around this one guy. So the guy is in a center urinal, and then Bob Saget's to the left urinal, and then John Stamos is to the right. And then it's just the guy just has to confront with the fact that he's
being
peeing
surrounded
right
by
next to like two of the dads from Full House.
Yeah, right.
You know?
He's Joey
Exactly.
in that situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go Dave
And-
Coulier.
Oh, Dave. So
Where
exactly.
like, is that story
Where-
true? Is that false? Like, it
knows?
could very well be
Yeah.
a true story, but like, I'm not insanely sure if it's true in the first place.
Right. Well, so many comedians rely on their relatability.
Yeah.
They rely on the fact that they want to make it seem fresh. A lot of different
In
comedians
a chummy sort of way.
Right. So like a lot of comedians, they use these methods, and that's what we think their personality is, but it's not actually their personality. They use these methods to make it look like it's fresh whenever it's clearly not.
And-
so like a big one is Dave Chappelle's cigarette, right? So he will use that as a way to make it seem like he's having a thought for the first time because he'll pause to like smoke a cigarette. A lot of people will do the Bill Burr. His big one is that he'll always like forget names. You can tell that like there's no way you've done this stand-up set like 100 times.
And like kind of even briefly, if you watch something as silly as it is, comedians in cars getting coffee, like you get a sort of peek behind the curtain, like a tiniest bit of peek, and then you realize, oh my god, this thing is so meticulously done. The best of the best comedians make it so not obvious at all that the work they're doing is insanely hard and insanely thought out.
Well, I mean, oh gosh, I was just watching an interview of Louis Anderson, who is an older comic, way older, who was on Conan a couple years ago, and he was talking about how he would write jokes, and sometimes there would be jokes that would like just happen really easily, and like they were because it was just real life stuff. But the jokes that were lies that he had to like kind of fabricate to make it funny, he would take literally years to write a joke that lasts like 10 seconds.
Yeah.
It would take, so but he was like, one of my favorite jokes that I ever wrote, it took me 10 years to write it. And it's only, he's like, I timed it, it's only 8 seconds of my act. Like 8 seconds of my act took 10 years to write.
Yeah.
But it just depends, you know? James Acaster, what I find so fascinating about him is that he actually writes his stand-up specials with one structure, which is an illusion in comedy. No other comedian cares about structure in the same way that he does.
Well, I mean, he structures it like a performer. You know,
the thing.
like
He writes it
a
like a
solo
play.
performance piece.
So before he even figures out what jokes he's going to say or any stories he's going to tell.
I also want to refute that point a little bit, where like I find it hard to believe that like other comics don't care a lot about structure, especially when like the element of callbacks is becoming very, very relevant for a lot of comedians. Like the usage of callbacks, like calling back to a previous joke or a thought or a story, is like imperative for later parts of the act for a lot of comics. That I feel maybe I'm stretching this a little bit, but it may be hard to watch a special nowadays without a callback. You know, so the structure.
You're correct.
I think structure is more important to more comics than you may be giving it credit for.
I will accept that. You're probably correct on that one. At the same time, I think the difference is that, for instance, a person who masters the callback and like almost like defines it for us nowadays is Dave Chappelle. Dave Chappelle, in his 7 most popular stand-up specials, 6 of them he ends it with a callback. And not only does he make his callbacks so stellar and they're so freaking funny, at the same time, he also basically trains his audiences that whenever you get a really stellar callback at the end of the show, that's him telling you that the show's over.
And so it's such good buttons.
Amazing buttons, right? So like the audience he will not say thank you, like have a good night, that's my time, or whatever like that. He will say a punchline that is a callback to a joke from the beginning of the show, and everyone will just start clapping because they know it's done.
Yeah, you just know.
Yeah, because he's trained you to think that, right?
And like 9 times out of 10, it's a very, very big story, and then it ends with the callback.
Exactly.
And I know for a fact it happens with at least two of the episodes per se.
Yeah.
2 of the episodes specials. For James Acaster, I know for a fact it happens with the first and the last.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sure it happens for the middle 2 as well, but I'm not
It does, yeah,
I
because
leak
of
confidence
the
a little bit in that.
because of the Christingle.
That's right.
Yeah, in the
Second one.
You're right.
What's a Christingle, Mac?
Oh, okay. So a Christingle is a candle in an orange.
Yeah. And there's like pencils hanging out of it too.
With a bunch of toothpicks.
Oh, sorry.
That have, I think it's like meat and cheese
Something
attached
like
to
that,
them.
Yeah.
And
you can eat
and
it
there's like a
there.
ribbon around the orange. Yeah, and so you like eat the toothpick meat cheese one at a time, and then you unwrap the orange with the candle still in it and start eating the orange around it's ridiculous. Anyways, it's something in his act. It's insane. But even Dave Chappelle, I think the big difference is that Dave Chappelle will use callbacks. And they're excellent, but I think that the callbacks are an illusion of structure in that he could take out and replace any of the jokes in his special, and it would still be the special.
Okay.
James Acaster cannot
like he has like
take
a toolbox.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. James Acaster cannot take out or put in any other jokes because his stories, and more importantly, the narrative, the character arc of James Acaster, which we have to get to in a second, is dependent on the stories he's telling.
He has a script.
Absolutely has a script. He has to. And the script did not come from this would be funny. The script came from this is the story I'm trying to tell. Not story as in I went to the market one day and blah 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 like other comedians.
Yeah, you went to the Coin Star, yeah.
The Coin Star.
The deep cut.
I know. But he is telling a story in terms of like we're watching a character in a play, and that's what I love so much about James Acaster is that it is way more theater than it is, and he knows that way more theater than it is stand-up comedy, and that's what makes it so experimental and so wild and so interesting. So the story that James Acaster is trying to tell, we need to get to that because that's also what makes me so attached to the story and what makes me so emotional. And I told you this the other day, I get weirdly emotional with James Acaster and specifically Repertoire for some reason. And it's partially because I feel connected to him in like a material kind of way, like a content things he's making kind of way, but also because it's just so beautiful and one of the best ways I can think of for a person to tell the story he's trying to tell, which is you can see over the course of the 4 specials, he is himself trying to come closer to telling you the truth. I was talking about earlier what makes him so special and so
earlier as in the
revolutionary.
cut first part that we had dumped?
No. In this one, I promise.
I can't remember anything anymore.
Yeah, I know, me neither. It's so difficult. I've fully moved past.
Okay.
And I think we're officially into the new stuff.
I like bringing it up though.
Me too. It was difficult. So anyways, what makes him so special is the fact he's self-aware in his lying, right? But here, how he does that is he will very blatantly lie to you, tell you that he's lying, and not tell you the truth. But as the specials go on, we start to see more clearly the truth. We start to see more clearly James Acaster's real person rather than the character that he is portraying for us. And that's something that we never see in Bo Burnham. And that's something that we never see in these
Whoa. Sorry.
Yeah, please.
I was being a bad co-host. I was only kind of
have at it.
3/4 listening. So you're saying he gets closer to becoming the person James Acaster and away from the character?
Yeah.
You're going to tell me that's not the case with Bo Burnham?
I'm saying that Bo Burnham will sometimes...
Particularly with Inside.
Right. I'm saying that Bo Burnham will show you bits and pieces of... Like, you kind of have to put together the puzzle for Bo Burnham in terms of like, oh, that's what he's trying to say. It is art in that way. and that's very impressive. But I don't think that Bo Burnham is ever willing to talk directly to the audience as himself, and that's not necessarily something that Bo Burnham's always going to be polished. Bo Burnham's always going to be polished, and he's always going to...
Even if it's like dirty per se, it's always in a polished...
It's an intentional
sort of
dirty.
Yeah.
James Acaster, I think, is willing to eventually look you directly in the face and like tell you how hard of a time he's having. Bo Burnham will show you, but James Acaster will like, you know what I mean? Like,
Okay, so yeah. So let me entertain this thought.
Please.
Then. So then, is there like a particular example from these 4 specials?
Yes.
Where that is the case? Okay.
Yeah. So the biggest example that I can think of is whenever at the very end of the last one,
Okay.
he has a wooden duck.
Right.
And the wooden duck he got from this bar or whatever. And it is and he's like ashamed of looking at the duck because it's like the wooden duck is used to like lure out all the real ducks because they think that it's a real duck, and then all the hunters like kill off all the real ducks and everything. And so he talks about that a little bit. And so he has the wooden duck facing the audience while he is facing away from the audience, which is interesting. And he's talking as the real duck coming upon the wooden duck,
yeah.
which is hilarious, right? And it was a super cool concept. And then he starts telling the audience about like after the real duck has been killed, like what happens to his family and everything. And I counted, and it was insane. We talked about callbacks. Something that he's doing that, like you said, is not reinventing the wheel, but is kind of revolutionary in a way. In that one story, starting whenever he has the wooden duck to the end of the wooden duck segment, 13 callbacks.
That is
to the past 4 specials.
Yes.
Unbelievable. But in that moment, over the course of the wooden duck story, we start to see James Acaster. He starts talking in the perspective of this real duck or whatever, and then you...
Oh no, I just coughed into the mic. That's a... God damn it! Oh god, I was about to cough away, but it just came out of nowhere.
Saying? He starts to what?
Oh well, he's using the fake real duck. Hold on, wait.
The wooden duck. He's
using the real duck
voice.
Character voice as an apparatus for himself.
Yes, and so he just starts telling you in the most blatant and clear terms exactly what he is thinking and the things that he is going through.
He also does that, I think, in a prior, and Mac is adding a point, so we are now tied again.
Yes,
God
we are.
Damn it.
Yes, we are.
We need to discuss tiebreakers because I don't think we ever got around to discussing that. But
I won't need one. I'm sorry, I'm kidding. That was
bombastic.
Not the truth.
That was
But
he does that in an earlier special as well, where he's like talking to an audience member and like all the details that he's like, I think the audience member was like, let's just say his name was Alex because I can't remember. It's like, Alex, you had this experience, and then he says the exact experience that James himself was having. It was like, you had that experience, right? And then you were looking at the ticket for your own show, and the ticket said James Acaster, and like it was like he leaned. Jeez.
Leaned.
Oh my god.
I don't fucking know.
He leaned into that more of like, yes, I'm using you as an apparatus.
Yes.
So much so that I'm not even changing any names in the story, that the ticket for the show that you have is still my name. You know.
And on that lend, let's take a break and come back in just a moment, sir.
All right. I just remembered something, guys. Mac, I just remembered something.
What'd you remember?
That for our sleeper picks, whenever it's a video game, I decided I'm gonna start this thing. I'm gonna start this cool brand new thing that is new for me, right? I started a Twitch account.
Fuck yeah, you did, Danny.
So very
soon, you did.
So very soon, I'm going to start streaming and recording my playthrough of our sleeper pick. What a sleeper pick is that like if it takes longer than 12 hours max or so, like we'll set that pick to the side, and we'll eventually slowly pick at it, get to it, and whenever we're both finished with it, we'll review it. We're doing The Last of Us, a hit video game that released on the PS3 and PS4. And so I am going to stream that on my Twitch. My Twitch is at Senor Danny Boy. There's no spaces, and it's Senor SR, so it's SR Danny Boy. That's it. No other fancy spelling to that.
Okay.
And that's my Twitch, and so I'm gonna be.
You got a new follower in me.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
We'll start following, and then I'll start streaming soon, and then the broadcast will be uploaded there as well, and I'll be doing at least that on behalf of the Artenders, and I'll probably, eventually stream some other things.
You'll do Artenders and your own thing.
Yeah.
Great.
But at least to start, I'll be beginning with The Last of Us, which is really exciting, and I look forward to making that content more ways than one.
Absolutely. So Artenders are now on all media platforms, all sound audio platforms.
Wherever you get your podcast.
We are now on TikTok, YouTube, and Twitch.
I'm on Twitch.
You're on Twitch on behalf of the Artenders.
And I'll be doing stuff on behalf of the Artenders. Right. It is very much so still my Twitch.
Yours. Absolutely. Yeah, because you're now a streamer, Danny.
Not officially. Although technically I did start today.
You did?
However, it was only 20 minutes in. Well, it was only 20 minutes in just to test.
Okay.
Yeah, on The Last of Us. Yeah.
Beautiful.
But I need to do some restructuring, rearranging.
Daniel.
But
Daniel Arturo
But for the most part, it's set up.
Fantastic.
Mac.
So,
what were the points that you were going to bring up?
Now, there is a lot more that I could go into on James Acaster.
But what was what we left?
We left off with his his journey over the course of the 4 episodes, the 4 specials, getting closer and closer to reality and honesty.
Yeah.
And it's something that, especially whenever it was released, I was feeling like really specifically close to, like watching him feel the need to perform and then watching it very slowly fade away. A lot of the specific stories he told as well, like he's just so polarizing. He's such a polarizing comic. Just think about the way that he starts his specials. Just for a moment. He starts one of them in blackout. Like, he's just talking to the audience in blackout for a while. Like, that's like the first segment. Like, the first story of his stand-up is just that. There's another one where he walks on mid-monologue. He's in the middle of a joke. He's in the middle of telling a joke as he's walking on stage. That's unheard of. What the hell? There was what was
the very first one, he starts out on his knees.
Yeah.
And then 10 minutes in, finally, he's like, in my head, I don't actually start until I start standing up. And then 5 minutes later, the moment he stands up, he beep on his watch.
He starts his time,
and then towards the end, when he gets back down, he beeps on his watch. And then he also does that sort of like bit in a couple of other specials.
Yeah, in the third one.
So it's like, but it's still calling back to those entrances as well in this very weird ways. But like,
that is also
ways that work for him.
Something that that similar to The Wire and similar to In the Mood for Love, I believe, where I didn't give it enough respect at first, the very first time I ever watched it.
Sure.
That I'm watching it, I'm just like, okay, whatever, it's stand-up. And then whenever I noticed that he was making callbacks to jokes literally specials ago, that in audience time was months ago, that is... I was shocked. I was like, I'm sorry, what?
So, I have a question.
Yeah.
So, do you know the production process behind...
Of how he...
Correct.
So, I believe he did record them all at different locations.
It looks like the same space.
I'm pretty sure that he recorded it at... Yeah, please have at it.
Yeah, I'm gonna do some Googling, but please.
But I know that at minimum they were all relatively like close in time to each other.
Okay.
But anywho, he and on his knees and everything. That's freaking hilarious. Also that he does have like a linear way of recording the specials that like at the end of episode 2, right? Going into at the end of episode 2, he has a freak out, and his freak out involves him taking every single bit of the stage apart and laying it on the ground. And then did you notice that in the beginning of the 3rd episode, the 3rd special, it's like him putting it back together.
Yes.
And then at the end of the 4th one, he is walking off stage and then immediately gets in his costume so that he can come on stage for the first one.
It's another cycle.
It is a cyclical journey, and also just kind of depressing. But so freaking beautiful. And no stand-up comedian that I can think of has that much thought and storytelling value in the stuff that they're making right now. There's one more thing, Danny. That
I'm so trying to prove you wrong.
Yeah, please.
I'm desperately because it
looks like the same space.
It looks exactly like the same space.
Uh-huh.
I find it extremely hard to believe that it's not done at the same space. I imagine that it's done, throughout different times and stuff.
Probably wasn't all in one evening.
I imagine it wasn't done in one evening because that would be absurd and very tiring.
But also the fact that he goes from one from episode 4 back into episode 1 makes me feel like he does do them in repertoire. You know what I mean?
Huh.
I'm serious. Like, you know what I mean? Like I wouldn't be surprised if he actually does go to a location and then perform them. Like, one night he'll do one and then he'll just like do them in succession.
Well, so I just saw this briefly online. So originally he just had recognize, represent, and reset, and he would perform those at different venues, like one for each night, and then eventually recap. Sort of the fourth one developed itself, and then it became like a 4-part sort of thing that he would perform at different venues, or rather, he would go to a venue, perform each one each night. Is how he would sort of set that up.
Also, you want to know something crazy about the way he wrote this?
So I would find it once again very strange. I can't find anything conclusive very quickly. It would be a lot easier if we had a third person to look this up, but we don't. And I also have to kind of listen to you at the same time, which sucks.
I feel bad
listening to you. You're the absolute worst.
I can't agree more.
Since it was sort of set up like that, I would be surprised that would not be the case for Repertoire, or at least the Netflix special that is Repertoire.
There was something that you said on Monday when we were talking very briefly about
Today is Wednesday?
Today's Wednesday. You said at one point something about him being an absurdist comedian.
Yep.
I have a little bit of a qualm with that. Because although I think that some of the things he does are a little absurd, I think that is implying that he is doing them for the sake of absurdity. And that is difficult for me.
So what do you... Okay.
I'm saying that I think that every single thing that he does that could be deemed absurd is given an explanation or does actually make sense eventually. And all the things that he does are for a either comedic or storytelling purpose.
So is absurdity?
Not all.
Okay.
Some of it,
but I guess what you're trying to say is I'm being disingenuous when I'm just calling him an absurd comic.
Sure. So like a lot of absurdist comedians like get a bad rap, and like a deserved bad rap, because the thing that makes them funny is the absurdity, not the thing that the absurdity leads to, not the eventual realizations that are made from it. So like very, very popular modern absurdist comedians, probably one of the biggest ones, and that I'm like a medium fan of, is Eric Andre. I don't know if you know who that is.
Yeah.
So the Eric Andre show is absurdist in that like it's just random and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but that's kind of the point. It doesn't ever strive to.
Where I feel like with James Acaster, what makes it funny to me is the confidence within the absurdity. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And then also like the realization of why the absurdity is there eventually. So like, for instance, whenever he's doing...
instead of just the absurdity being there, that's the funny part. It's like, no. The absurdity is just an apparatus. It's just a bridge to like this other thing. That's actually the funny part.
So, or like a lot of seemingly absurdist comedy things. So like, for instance, there's one segment of one of the specials where he... music starts playing randomly, and you're like, "What is this music coming from?" And then he goes, and grabs some props and like starts making like funny poses at random moments. And as an audience member, you're just like, "What the hell is he doing right now?" And then at the very end, the there's like this like check mark sound as he just like looks very blankly at you, and then at the very end he titles it. He's like, by the way, that piece was titled "The Do's and Do Nots of Passport Photos," and like
out of nowhere.
Right, it's out of nowhere, and so while you're experiencing it, it is absurdist. Afterwards, there is context given, and the sense is funny, not necessarily the absurdity. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay.
And so
I will allow this criticism upon myself. Very well.
and so it's like it's almost like he masks himself as an absurdist comedian. And another thing, like you said, he doesn't revel in his own jokes, and he tries so hard to convince you that he's not funny, so that whenever he is, it is that much more exciting. I think that he actually kind of bends over backwards to convince you that he's not funny, or like to tell you that what he's about to say is not funny. Don't laugh. Don't laugh. Don't laugh at what I'm about to say. And that's partially why you laugh. So like, a lot of his topics that he talks about, or like the themes that he touches on, are pretty serious ones, and like he sets them up in such like a genuine way that like that's partially what makes them so funny. So like, for instance, whenever he's talking about like witness protection, or whenever he's talking about his freaking The Wire podcast, where he just like will play into the microphone an episode of him trying to be an undercover cop, is like, it is so funny. But it's the fact that like the first like maybe, I'm not gonna say 5 minutes, maybe 2 or 3 minutes of that joke are simply not funny.
Yeah.
That whenever he starts hitting you with jokes, what's the phrase that he says over and over again? Say your prayers. That's what
you just hear him just like,
say your prayers, say your prayers, say your prayers. So funny.
In the middle of like this cacophony
right.
of just loud, angry noises. You
right.
know, you just hear a little bit of say your prayers here and there.
Right. Or like, another one is because part of the things that make callbacks so interesting is that it feels like an inside joke, right? And that's a big reason why comedians do it, is because it feels like something that we can share. For instance, I went a while back, a couple years ago, to see John Mulaney to record Kid Gorgeous, and he
recorded.
Or sorry, not recorded. I apologize. Thank you for catching me. Not recorded. I watched him perform Kid Gorgeous. And so he was sitting there doing you could have let that slide and it would have been a point. That's so sweet of you. I appreciate it.
Who says
you.
it can't be a point? Not just
I
kidding,
can feel it.
kidding,
I can see in your eyes you going like,
Give me that.
There was one moment where someone got up to go to the restroom, and he started making jokes about that specific person. And then he said, okay, now that person's gone. And he's made an inside joke with the other like 1,200 people in the room, where he was like, okay, so they're going to come back and I'm going to make a joke that's not going to make any sense. And he was like, but what should it be? And then we all made up together. He was like, okay, I'm going to say this punchline. That person's not going to know what we're talking about, and it's not going to make any sense. And so we made up I can't even remember what the sentence was. It was something like, and that's why you can't trust cheerleaders, or something like that, right? And so he never tells us an actual joke about it, right? But it's the fact that at the end of the show, he's finished his entire act, and it's been really funny. He's like, thank you. Like that's been my time. I'm John Mulaney. Like, thanks for coming out. Like, I'll see you next time. And like, he's like starting to leave. And then he comes back and he's like, I totally forgot. I almost forgot. Sorry. I just wanted to make sure you guys know that you can't trust cheerleaders. And then looks at the person that left to go to the restroom. He's like, am I right? Or am I right? And we're dying laughing, even though it's not funny. But like, just because it's an inside joke, right? So
right.
That's
it feels like
that's
you're.
I hit it. I totally hit the chord. I did. I hit it.
All right.
I don't know if it's gonna read, but I hit it.
Okay.
Tying it up again. Oh no.
You went back up.
Yeah, I did go back up. That's just mean. That's mean though.
Wait, do you want to get a longer extension cable? Would that make you happy? Deep down,
maybe,
yeah.
Maybe. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll look into it. I guess I'll have to. Fuck my life. Okay. That's a Mac at 9, Danny at 7. Whatever.
Mac at 9, Danny at 7.
Okay. I was gonna say, yeah. So that's oftentimes
You feel like you're a part of something, and that's the comedy of it.
and that's oftentimes why they do callbacks, right? Now, what's so interesting about James Acaster is that most of the time you'll do a callback so that you feel close to the audience as a whole.
Yeah.
He does not necessarily use callbacks that way. He will use a callback, and sometimes everyone will get it, but sometimes he'll say callbacks that he does not give a fuck how many people know what he's talking about.
Okay, such as?
For instance, he at one point uses an inside joke. He's talking about bread, and he's like, my least favorite types of bread. And then he lists all the Subway breads. And everyone that's been to Subway has heard those breads before, and it's funny. And you're like, that's fucking hilarious. And then he says, if you don't get that joke, you live a better life than me. And the crazy thing is that if you didn't get that joke, he never explains it.
Yeah.
He's just like, if you got it, you got it. If you didn't, you didn't. We're moving on now.
And we're just going to move on.
And we're just going to move on.
Yeah. But what's great is that he doesn't dwell, for the most part, I don't think, he doesn't dwell too much on a joke.
Yeah.
And so, like, even
Moving
if
on.
a joke is not successful for you, don't worry. Next one's already coming up.
Right. So, there's absolutely that. Another example would be whenever he makes callbacks to past specials, and not everyone in the audience understands the reference. So, like, whenever he, like 3 in, I think, part 3, he will, like, press the beep or the timer or whatever on his clock, his watch. I'm sorry, I'm
the full ass clock
I
just
know.
in his pocket.
On this clock, he will do that, and only half the audience is laughing because only half the audience, like, maybe really understands, like, what's so funny about that.
That it's alluding to the first.
Right, and the main reason that we get it is because we just watched it. We just watched the other special. Super, super clever. And so, I've been ranting for the literal entire
It's fine.
episode.
I have a potential sizzle. I don't think it's a sizzle serve.
Please.
But I think it's a sizzle serve in regards to you. So maybe I'll put some different image in.
Oh, no. Okay, go ahead.
That I think James Acaster does not necessarily, maybe this is a sizzle serve, I don't know, translates that well over screen.
Mm-hmm.
I think James Acaster is one of those comedians. I can tell he's very, very funny, but, like, I think it's certainly enhanced when you're in person, and that's generally the case with comedians anyways. But I feel like James Acaster is one of those folks where you, in my opinion, I really wanted to be in the room because I was like, some of these things aren't landing, and I think it's because I'm just not in the room.
Yeah.
I was having the experience with a comedian that I saw last December, Taylor Tomlinson, whom I hadn't seen a special of hers at all. This was just a bare experience.
Raw dog in the experience. Good for you.
That was just a poor choice of words there.
It was intentional.
Okay. And, wow, and I'm hungry. That was just a... We'll see if the microphone...
I thought it was a motorcycle outside. Fuck.
Did you really hear that?
Yeah.
Oh,
It was
no.
from the outside.
Yeah, you know how it is. Yeah. Anyways, but I saw that tour performance live in a theater, and I was smiling the entire time. My face physically hurt from smiling the entire time. Mm-hmm. I think it's also safe to say, if I had watched that special on a screen, on television, on whatever, I would not feel as positive about it as I did when I was there, right? I think you were sort of alluding to it a little bit with the John Mulaney thing, where it's that aspect of community.
Right.
Where I think the aspect of community lends really well to James Acaster.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of like, because it's the uncomfortable nature. And when I say uncomfortable, like, he doesn't do anything like, he doesn't talk about anything uncomfortable, but
no,
it's that absurdist tinge. And I know, once again, I'm being a little bit disingenuous, but that's the best word I can come up with. It's that absurdist tinge that he adds to his work that lands so much better when you're there in person, because then you can hear the breaths of everyone around you. Yeah. Like, when you're at home watching something on a screen, you're in your safe space, right? But when you're, and this applies to theater as well, when you're like in the thick of it in person watching it there, you're not necessarily in a safe space. And so you're sort of forced a lot more to be faced with that sort of uncomfortable nature that's being presented to you. And so because of that, I think James Acaster lends a lot better to just being in person. And like I said, that's more than likely probably 99% of the case with other comedians anyways.
Yep.
But I felt like the sort of disparity was larger with James Acaster as opposed to other comedians.
Yeah.
And so I could acknowledge that this is really, really well done, but I was having the experience. I would like this so much more if I was there, which is unfair because I don't even know when the hell if I'm ever going to be able to see James Acaster in person.
Right.
And it sort of is the same thing of like, some people consider Grateful Dead's music, repertoire, okay, right? Or like, good, right? But when they're actually performing in front of you, that's when they really shine.
Yeah.
As opposed to some other artists, right? Or like some hip hop artists maybe, where their music, when you listen to it, is fantastic, but they aren't that great of performers.
Right.
And so I felt that case with James Acaster where this is still very good and I'm able to acknowledge it, and I'm able to acknowledge the sort of fine crafting, unique ability that he presents with these specials. Gosh darn, it would have been so much better if it was in person.
Yes.
And so that's the thing that's holding me back from James Acaster.
Well, also
and
translates
it's difficult,
similar to actual experimental and absurdist theater. You know what I mean? That hasn't really made its way to the silver screen for a reason.
Yeah. The discomfort doesn't translate well.
Not at all. It's
just
just it's more strange and like unsettling than it is like something that you have to deal with. And also being in a space, you feel the necessity to stick it out. Yeah. And you're always better for it. But because you have the ability to turn it off, I could see a lot of people turning on James Acaster being like, okay, and then halfway through just being like, what? And flipping it off.
And it's a little bit of bystander effect too, where if you're in the middle of an audience and like the audience is laughing, you're going to end up laughing. If the audience is jeering, you're going to end up jeering.
There's the feeling the temperature of the room and following it is one thing. Also, warm-ups. Did they have an opener for Taylor Tomlinson?
Yes, they did. They did. They had another comedian that was a friend of hers. Come on.
There it is. And that's a way bigger help than you think. Because even if they're not super funny,
it's the same thing that they do for musical acts, like specifically music artists. Yeah. Not musicals. I wanted to give that clarification.
Because it's a win-win, because either they're not great and you are refreshed and relieved to see the act, or they're really good and you're ready to laugh some more because you're already in the mood. Yeah. Another one's alcohol. I mean, whenever you go to a space, a lot of people are drinking. Most comedy specials or comedy acts,
people have had a drink or two.
Yeah, that's a
very
big
likely.
One. So
all those factors contribute, as opposed to me sitting on my couch by myself, just watching a special after I got off from work.
Right.
It's a very, very different experience, and I feel
100%.
like that is important to consider, especially Mr. Acaster's work. Is the big thing that I wanted to bring up.
I wanted to not like totally end, but kind of come to the end of this podcast on a story, a bit of gossip.
Wow.
So
Jeez me.
So James Acaster is, I think that we can actually say, in terms of all the people that we have reviewed, is most similar to, for many reasons, Rowan Atkinson. Rowan Atkinson, he have a lot of similarities in terms of their like kind of awkward and uncomfortable comedy that is sort of experimental, and people don't really know how to handle it at first.
But he was more of like a physical sort of comedian, where like James Acaster, he's still physical but relies a lot more on the language.
Different in style, very similar in ideology.
I'm with you.
And something that is funny is that Rowan Atkinson was also a large reason why James Acaster got into comedy. It's like one of his heroes, right? So James Acaster, he kind of mentioned this a couple times in the special, and he has in all of his specials that he was married, right?
Wow.
Or at least engaged.
Oh my God. Okay, but get to
Sorry.
the point.
So
Christ,
he was
I
with
mean,
this.
okay, so you gave yourself the
girl.
blanket. Maybe he was engaged.
Yeah, I
maybe he
have
was
to.
married.
We have points now.
Well,
so,
yeah. But I'm happy it took you 5 seconds of silence to figure that out.
Okay, we'll cut it out, Danny. So
I can't. We're doing video
you're
as well.
You're true. Okay. No, let's just. I'll fill.
No.
I'm gonna move on. So he was with this girl, right? And they're tight or whatever, and so he gets left by this
They're
woman.
tight or whatever.
So I'm trying to get back up mental track. He gets left by this woman, and I want you to take a guess who she married recently.
George Clooney. I don't know. You're not giving me any hints. Rowan Atkinson? No.
His wife left them
No.
to get with Rowan Atkinson.
Oh, that's a.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Exactly. There's so many thoughts, right? So many thoughts going through the old noggin.
Well, like, do you think like, oh yeah, I get it. You know, like,
No.
what do you?
No.
Or
It's
you
so
think
confusing.
that son of a bitch?
It does give me hope. Like, okay, well, clearly she has a type. You know what I mean? But at the same time, it's like there is.
I'm not sure I do,
an
but let's move on.
unavoidable age gap. Anyways, so with
all
this
the same.
with this closing time, Danny,
I mean, Christ.
what were your opinions of James Acaster's repertoire? Would you recommend it? What would be something that you might steal?
I think it's really good. I think sort of the usage of callbacks and the confidence in the comedy and the being the comedian's comedian and just not even relishing of jokes, because whenever I make jokes, I relish in those. I bathe myself like a pig in mud. You know,
It's true.
So anyways, so that's a big thing that I want to take away from this. I still think it's very good. If this is Baby's first comedy special, I wouldn't do this one. But I think it's very good, and I think it's very important to implement the sort of idea of the confidence and the absurdity and the meticulous script nature as opposed to the toolbox, right? Because we see him sort of interact with audience members, but those interactions are like specifically in the script as opposed to like, I'm taking what I'm getting from the audience member and I'm going to use that, right? Like it's very different in that regard. But all the same, I think it's really, really good. And I think it's worth watching. Isn't my cup of tea-ish, but I think mostly because it doesn't lend well to me through screen. Mac.
I think it. I mean, no. I think it's awesome. I think it's really, really good, and I'm very impressed by it, and I want to make something similar someday.
Are we in the 2-minute warning?
It passed.
You're an idiot.
I know, but I just after we already passed it,
Can't
I
believe
was like,
so much
why
time
not?
do we have left? Oh my God.
So, Danny, what are we watching next week?
Could have given me the goddamn warning.
Well, I'm sorry. After we passed it, I just wanted
It's
to.
going to be
move
a
past it.
3-episode arc of the Artenders relating to this one thing, which is a surprise to you.
Okay, yeah.
But it is going to be the anime television series we're starting off with, Cowboy Bebop.
I'm waiting for this. Thank you.
One of my favorite shows of all time.
Thank you, sir.
3, 2, 1, let's jam.